December 22nd, 1944. Late afternoon shadows stretch long over the frozen Ardennes forest, just outside Bastogne, Belgium. The sky above is heavy with slate-gray clouds, pregnant with winter's unyielding chill. You can almost feel the biting cold, a cruel wind that cuts through the mismatched layers of uniform. A wind laden with the scent of damp earth, gunpowder, and smoke, curling from distant artillery. The village of Bastogne itself is a ghostly silhouette against the twilight. Roads are clogged with battered vehicles stuck in the thick mud, supply trucks groaning under the strain, and exhausted soldiers slogging through knee-deep snow. Tanks, their tracks caked in grime and frost, grind forward, their engines growling low, a growl swallowed by the stillness. Amid this grim tableau, a convoy of armored vehicles tears through the gloom. At the lead, a gleaming silver staff car slices the gray, its headlights cutting a narrow path through the encroaching darkness. Inside, General George S. Patton, a man famed and feared in equal measure, peers through the windshield, clocks ticking, decisions racing. His face, shadowed beneath a leather helmet, shows no trace of hesitation. Behind Patton, the men and machines of the Third Army press on. Their arrival, not merely a movement of troops, but a declaration, a relentless storm riding into the heart of a besieged Bastogne. The village is surrounded, a vital crossroads captured in the grip of the German offensive. Supplies are near exhaustion, morale dangerously frayed, and yet hope breathes still in the form of these armored reinforcements. But something hangs in the air, heavier than winter fog. The tension is electric. Will Patton's arrival break the siege? Or will the frozen roads and deadly snipers turn this desperate gambit into a final grave? Inside headquarters miles away, Dwight D. Eisenhower listens intently, knowing this moment could alter the course of the Ardennes counterattack and the fate of the entire European campaign. What Eisenhower thought as Patton's column pushed through the snow and fire would become legend, but not without controversy. What lies ahead for Bastogne? And for Patton himself? You step into Patton's shoes for a moment. The roar of engines and the crunch of icy gravel beneath tank treads form a harsh cadence. Every soldier shivers, teeth clenched against the cold that gnaws like a beast. Still, there is no room for weakness, no pause for breath. With Bastogne encircled and the enemy tightening the noose, every second counts. General Patton sits rigid, his mind racing in a flurry of calculations. The Third Army's rapid pivot to Bastogne was no accident. It was the embodiment of his reputation for audacious, lightning-fast maneuvers. He'd earned the name as a commander who seized the initiative, who struck fear not just through firepower, but sheer will. As his staff officers map out the next few hours, Patton's commands cut through the radio static with sharp precision. Push through. No hesitation. The men are counting on us. Yet, behind that iron resolve lies something more complex. Eisenhower, back at Supreme Headquarters, appreciates the burden Patton carries, the risk of sending battered troops and machinery through a war-torn landscape littered with mines, snowdrifts, and enemy fire. Every decision Patton makes now could save lives or cost them. Still, Eisenhower watches, knowing that Patton personifies the hope that Bastogne desperately needs. His arrival signals more than reinforcements. It signals a reignition of fighting spirit, a rallying cry to beleaguered troops holding the frozen crossroads. But Patton is not without his critics. Behind the scenes, doubts simmer about his temperament, his recent controversies, and whether his relentless pace might push men beyond their limits. As Patton's convoy nears the outskirts, the landscape transforms from muted grays into chaotic flashes of flares, mortar bursts, and tracer rounds slicing the dusk like angry sparks. Bastogne's defenders, ragged but resolute, glance toward the horizon. Could this be the relief they've prayed for? Behind it all, Eisenhower prepares to speak his remarks to come carry the weight of command, respect, and a hint of carefully measured caution. Who is George Patton really beneath the armor? And how will his arrival reshape the desperate fight at Bastogne? In the calm of his command tent, far from the frozen front lines, General Dwight D. Eisenhower fixes his gaze on the map before him. The tiny symbols, tanks, infantry battalions, artillery emplacements, all represent lives hanging in a precarious balance. The Ardennes offensive threatens to shatter the Allied advance, and Bastogne stands at the epicenter, a vital crossroads captured by German forces. Eisenhower's thoughts turn to Patton, a man of both brilliance and brashness. The two generals are vastly different. Ike's deliberation contrasts with Patton's fiery instinct. Yet for all their differences, Eisenhower knows that without Patton's armored resolve, the fate of Bastogne might already be sealed. When word came that Patton was redirecting his Third Army northward through impossible weather and terrain, Eisenhower was struck by a mixture of hope and apprehension. His respect for Patton's ability to move fast and crush anything in his path was tempered by awareness of the risks. Mechanical breakdowns, supply shortages, and a war-weary force could all slow this daring maneuver. In his forthcoming remarks, Eisenhower acknowledges Patton's arrival as both a strategic masterstroke and a symbol of fighting spirit. He understands that in war, leadership is as much about timing and willpower as it is about numbers and equipment. He knows that Patton's presence will steel the resolve of soldiers holed up in Bastogne as bitter cold, surrounded and outnumbered. It's a psychological victory as much as a military one. Yet Eisenhower's voice carries measured caution. Patton's methods, while effective, can spark friction among allies and subordinates alike. Ike knows the importance of balance between the brilliance of a commander and the coherence of a larger strategy. As the night deepens over Bastogne, Eisenhower's words offer something rare. Not just orders, but recognition of the human cost behind every move of the chessboard. What will Patton's arrival mean for the men entrenched in Bastogne's snow and mud? And how will this bold push ripple through a war already tipping on the edge? The lead tank's headlamps pierce the early evening gloom, casting long, flickering shadows over tree trunks wrapped in ice and snow. The air reeks of diesel exhaust, mingled with the sour tongue of gun meal and sweat. Through the slit of his vision block, Patton can just make out the shapes of men huddled behind shattered walls, rifles poised, faces drawn, teeth clenched against the cold. You can almost hear the brittle crackle of frost underfoot, the sudden burst of shouted commands breaking through the heavy silence. The village of Bastogne, worn and battered, does not welcome with cheers, but with a tension that feels as if the very earth is holding its breath. Patton's convoy slows. His staff officers shoot anxious glances this way and that, aware that every movement might draw unwanted German fire. The men, exhausted and cold to the bone, know this moment carries the weight of survival. For the defenders inside Bastogne men of the 101st Airborne, the 10th Armored Division, the site of Patton's forces arrives like the first crack of dawn after an endless night. They've held firm against overwhelming odds, surrounded by a foe eager to crush them into submission. Patton steps from his staff car, the crunch of snow under heavy boots echoing in the hollow streets. His presence is a spark in the darkness, a figure sharp and determined, a living embodiment of relentless force. His eyes scan the scene swiftly, cataloging damage, gauging morale. In this instant, the siege's desperation becomes palpable. Yet Patton's arrival does more than bring reinforcements. It brings the promise of aggressive counterattack, the kind of boldness that turns tides. But the village is no safe haven. German artillery continues to scream overhead, and winter's grip threatens both man and machine alike. Supply lines are tenuous, fuel and ammunition scarce. The gamble Patton takes here is huge. The men whisper among themselves, can Patton really smash through the enemy lines? Or will Bastogne become a trap with no escape? And what does Eisenhower, Praise spoken quietly, but with unmistakable respect mean for the man who thrives on battleless edge, but courts controversy in camp. Patton moves quickly, his boots crunching through snow mixed with mud and shattered remnants of war. He doesn't waste a moment. Orders flow from him like wildfire units repositioned, supply priorities redefined, artillery missions recalibrated. His voice, low and commanding, cuts through the cold air with the precision of a blade. Around him, officers scramble to translate his bold vision into action, rallying tired men and rusted machines toward a singular goal: breaking the siege. In those first hours after his arrival, Patton embodies the very essence of relentless momentum. He believes, as always, in the power of decisive offensive action, refusing to allow the enemy's encirclement to calcify into a stale stalemate. His presence ignites something intangible among the troops, the fierce urgency that distinguishes survival from surrender. You can almost feel it, a spark catching dry tinder, a whispered promise that the fight is far from over. But the battered terrain conspires against them. Frozen roads become treacherous ice traps. Vehicles mire in unyielding mud. Supply convoys stagger under relentless German shelling. Communication lines crack and falter. Even so, Patton pushes forward, urging his officers to take risks, to gamble everything on the fragile hope that speed, shock, and surprise will shatter the German grip. Meanwhile, back at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower watches closely. His remarks on Patton's efforts reflect a mixture of admiration and a wary recognition of the general as relentless temperament. Ike values Patton's genius on the battlefield, but understands the chaos his intensity can unleash. As Patton orchestrates a counter-thrust, the men face a brutal question. Can sheer willpower overcome the crushing weight of winter, enemy fire, and exhaustion? The answer will shape the fate of Bastogne and the future of the Ardennes campaign. The night is young, but the danger grows deeper. Patton's merciless drive will soon collide with the harsh reality of war's unforgiving limits. Beyond the strategy, beyond the tanks and artillery, there lie the men, the flesh and blood caught in the grinding gears of war. Soldiers huddle in frozen foxholes, faces drawn and numb, hands wrapped around scrawny mugs of lukewarm coffee. They listen to the crackle of radios, clinging to every word from Patton's staff, every promise that relief is near. Yet hope does not erase fear. Letters written in dirt and tears, whispered prayers carried in the wind, moments stolen in fleeting dreams of home, all linger like ghosts under the gray sky. Patton knows that victory hinges not just on tactics and firepower, but on the morale of these exhausted men. His arrival is meant to rekindle a fighting spirit, nearly broken by weeks of siege, bombardment, and bitter cold. But the risks are personal and immense. Each push forward invites the deadly prize of silence, an endless, unyielding night where comrades vanish beneath brutal fire or cold's merciless grip. Eisenhower's remarks, though formal and composed, carry an undercurrent of this reality. He praises Patton's boldness, yet acknowledges the weight of command, the terrible burden of sending men into harm's way. The general's correspondence reveals a mutual understanding. Leadership demands sacrifice. But each loss etches itself onto the soul, a silent testament beneath the monuments yet to be built. On the frozen roads around Bastogne, the battle is no longer just about lines on maps. It is about survival, endurance, and the fragile thread linking men to each other, to hope, and to whatever lies beyond the gunfire. As the cold deepens and night closes in, one question haunts the weary fighters. Can they hold long enough for Patton's push to break through? Or will Bastogne slip forever into history as a bitter, frozen grave? The pre-dawn silence is shattered by the low rumble of tanks stirring to life. Patton's forces, hard-pressed but undeterred, prepare to strike. Commanders confer in hurried whispers, maps strewn across makeshift tables illuminated by flickering lanterns. Every detail matters timing, coordination, the rock and ice beneath their boots. The siege on Bastogne has lasted too long. Ammunition runs dangerously low. Rations are mere memories. Yet within the ranks, a stubborn grit remains. Soldiers brace to meet the storm, knowing this assault carries the weight of their collective fate. Patton's orders are clear. Push through the enemy barricades, relieve the encircled, and reclaim Bastogne from the clutches of the German advance. Eisenhower's voice, recorded later in his remarks, captures this pivotal moment. He conveys a mix of pride in Patton as daring and the sober acknowledgement of what hangs in the balance. This was not just a military maneuver. It was a test of endurance, leadership, and sheer will. The men move forward under a hail of fire. Snow churns red with the blood of the fallen. Explosions shatter the fragile stillness. Tanks lurch across icy roads, their treads skidding dangerously close to ravines and wreckage. At the heart of the battle, Patton rides in his staff car, eyes sharp, pulse steady, commanding every move with an iron certainty. Yet even he cannot escape the cost, the lives lost, the futures broken. The lines between victory and disaster blur beneath the winter sky. Will Patton's drive prove unstoppable? Or has Bastogne reached its breaking point? The answer lies in the next moments of relentless, frozen fury. Then, as dawn breaks, a shift begins. The relentless push of Patton's armored divisions squeezes through the battered German defenses, inch by inch forcing gaps where none were thought possible. The roar of engines sounds like a desperate hymn, a declaration that the siege will not last much longer. You hear the crackle of radios, the shouted orders mingling with gunfire, and the dull thud of artillery impacts. Bastogne's defenders feel the first real surge of hope in weeks, their eyes brightening beneath frostbitten faces. The ground beneath the tanks trembles as armored columns surge forward, crushing barbed wire and enemy positions with thunderous force. Patton's gamble on speed and surprise begins to pay off, turning the tide of a battle that seemed on the verge of collapse. Yet victory is far from assured. German forces regroup, launching fierce counterattacks designed to stall the advance, to bleed precious momentum dry. The frozen Ardennes becomes an unforgiving chessboard of life and death. Eisenhower's remarks, delivered later with the gravitas of a commander who has witnessed history unfold, highlight Patton's extraordinary ability to inspire and execute under pressure. Ike's respect shines through, tempered by an acute awareness of the costs exacted on both men and machines. In this frozen crucible, leadership is tested not just by success, but by endurance, by the capacity to push forward when everything screams to stop. As Patton inches closer to Bastogne's heart, the siege begins to unravel. But questions linger. How many men will pay the ultimate price? And will this victory mark the beginning of the end, or just a brutal chapter in a war still far from over? Months later, in the quiet halls of Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower's words come into sharp focus. His remarks on Patton's arrival at Bastogne reflect more than the triumph of a hard-fought battle. They reveal the complexities of command in war's unforgiving theater. Ike speaks of Patton not just as a warrior, but as an emblem of determination and relentlessness. His arrival changed the course of the battle. Eisenhower would say, acknowledging the general's irreplaceable role in rallying the besieged forces. Yet Eisenhower never shies away from the total cost, the risks taken, the lives lost, the thin margins between boldness and recklessness. In his reflections, Patton's relentless aggression is both lauded and carefully appraised. This duality reveals the sharp edge beneath military leadership, the balance of courage and caution, action and strategy, personality and duty. Eisenhower understood that Patton's arrival at Bastogne was more than a maneuver. It was a statement of resolve, a psychological pivot that broke the enemy's grip, and a demonstration of American tenacity under fire. Behind the praise lies a profound respect for the human price each soldier, a son, A brother, a man caught in the tremendous sweep of history. As the winter of war raged on, Eisenhower's remarks stand as a testament to leadership forged by necessity, guided by vision, and tempered by the harsh realities of battle. What lessons from Bastogne would shape future commands? And how would Patton's legacy endure beyond the frozen woods and shattered roads? Patton's first arrival at Bastogne did not just alter the battle. It etched his persona deeper into the mythology of World War II. His boundless energy and aggressive tactics inspired troops and unnerved enemies, but they also stirred controversy. Behind the headlines and battlefield glory lay a man unafraid to clash with peers in politics alike. His harsh disciplinarian style, outspoken opinions, and occasional recklessness sometimes caused friction within the American command. Eisenhower's remarks subtly acknowledged this dual nature. While publicly praising Patton's genius and impact, Ike also navigated the tightrope between supporting a vital asset and maintaining cohesion among all Allied leaders. Within the ranks, stories spread of Patton's bold maneuvers, his fiery speeches, his refusal to accept defeat, even when odds seemed insurmountable. These tales fueled morale, but also highlighted the complexity of command personalities in war. The Bastogne breakthrough became a symbol of what aggressive leadership could achieve, demonstrating that even in the darkest moments, audacity and speed could flip the fortunes of battle. But it also raised questions about the cost of that audacity, the fine line between heroism and hazard. Patton's legacy, immortalized in Eisenhower's careful but respectful reflections, invites viewers to consider the burdens and brilliance intertwined in one of history's most relentless commanders. How did this moment shape Patton's career? And how would his actions here ripple through the final phases of the war? The clock ticks steadily as night moves toward dawn once more. Frost clings to every surface, and exhaustion is etched into every soldier's face. The hope sparked by Patton's arrival gives a fragile lift, but the struggle is far from over. Communications across the battered lines remain patchy. Orders must be repeated, positions confirmed by runners braving fire that continues to rage. Men share whispered prayers and stolen moments of silence, aware that the dawn could bring salvation or annihilation. Patton, ever vigilant, moves from post to post, his presence a steady force amid chaos. His eyes search the horizon, calculating, planning. He knows that while breaking the siege is critical, securing it for those inside is just as vital. Eisenhower's voice returns briefly in recollection, reminding us that leadership in war is more than strategy. It is a bond with those staggering through hell. He praises the resilience of Bastogne's defenders and the fierce tenacity of those who came to their aid. As artillery fire fades in the distance and German resistance begins to falter, a question hangs heavy. Will Bastogne stand, and with it the fragile hope for Allied progress in the Ardennes? In these final hours before relief, the battle for Bastogne boils down to grit, resolve, and the spirit to endure what seems impossible. Can this turning point hold? Or will winter's darkness claim another bitter sacrifice? As the first rays of dawn spill across the snow-blanketed Ardennes, the siege of Bastogne finally begins to break. The battered defenders, faces streaked with grime and frostbite, catch sight of the advancing tank's Patton's armored spearhead cutting through the shattered enemy lines. Cheers, hoarse and raw, rise from the trenches. Soldiers collapse into each other's arms, tears mingling with snow and sweat. The nightmare that gripped Bastogne loosens its icy hold for now. Eisenhower's words echo with a measured triumph, honoring not just the men who fought and died, but the unyielding spirit that refused to surrender. In his remarks on Patton's arrival, Ike recognizes the victory as more than a tactical success. It was a symbol of determination, leadership, and the unbreakable will of the Allied forces. Patton, ever restless even in victory, already turns his gaze forward. The battle here won, but the war is far from over. His fierce drive embodies both the heroism and the impermanence of success on the brutal stage of global conflict. Bastogne's story is one of courage amidst desolation, of leadership tested in fire and frost, and the indomitable human spirit that fights on when all seems lost. This moment, immortalized in Eisenhower's reflections, reminds us that war is never just about strategy or numbers. It is about men flawed, brave, relentless, who stand together in the darkest hours and dare to hope. And for George S. Patton, Bastogne was both a proving ground and a portent, an enduring testament to a general who would shape history by charging headfirst into the storm.